I think it's safe to say that The Legend of Zelda has left an indelible mark on popular culture, and is a household name at this point. The franchise itself has sold millions of copies worldwide, and according to the BBC, Tears of the Kingdom has already reached 10 million copies sold at the time of this recording. But how did we get here? Why is it that after all these years, The Legend of Zelda is still as prominent as ever in the world of gaming? To answer that question, we gotta look into the past. In 1986, the first ever Legend of Zelda game was released on the Nintendo Entertainment System as a mere 2D adventure game that gives consumers a different gaming experience other than, shooting animals and role-playing as Chris Pratt. For a game made in 1986, this is revolutionary, and it normalizes how games will be played in the future. From a design perspective, The Legend of Zelda gives the player enough information on where to go and what to do without just giving it all to the player and just holding their hand the entire time. For example, the moment you boot up the game, it already hints to you that this game would require you to explore with the introduction of the cave area where you get your first weapon of the game. The game designers already knew that the player would want to explore the landscape of Hyrule, and they cleverly decided to give the player a weapon to defend themselves right from the get-go. As such, the barrier to entry has been lowered as the player immediately feels way more confident about exploration than they would otherwise had they not been given the sword in the first place. The Legend of Zelda 1986 is a highly praised game and a highly influential game at that, being the backbone of the franchise and the gaming industry in general, becoming the foundations for which the other games in the series could build upon, like for example the direct sequel to the first game, Legend of Zelda 2, which further added new combat mechanics to the game such as blocking, jumping and dodging, which also came with an entirely new perspective which sees Link not from a top-down view when he's inside buildings, but from a side profile viewpoint, similar to the Metroid and Castlevania series. Furthermore, The Legend of Zelda 2 is the only game in the series to have included an RPG leveling up system. Zelda 2 encourages the player to defeat the enemies in the game in order to gain experience, which can boost Link's overall health, strength and magic to the point where damage is minimal and your attack points are literally above 9,000. A Link to the Past returned to basics with a top-down view and game mechanics that are reminiscent of the first game, albeit with much smoother frame rate. A Link to the Past also introduced numerous innovative ideas and abilities that have become staples in the Zelda series. For example, the hookshot allows Link to traverse gaps and reach distant areas. Ocarina of Time from the get-go was the first Zelda game that completely overhauled combat. This came in the form of the targeting system, which allowed players to lock onto enemies, interact with objects and characters, and provide precise control and enhancing combat encounters. I think the most famous gameplay mechanic in Ocarina of Time is the ocarina itself. It adds more depth to the game, and using the ocarina, players could play various melodies that can be acquired throughout the adventure, that can influence the environment, can even manipulate time itself. And I guess Nintendo loved time so much that it was further refined through the next game, Majora's Mask, which they make it literally part of the narrative itself. You see, just like Alice, Link fell down a hole one day, but instead of turning up in Wonderland, he turned up in the worst place he could ever turn up in, and that's Termina, which is facing imminent destruction by a malevolent moon. As such, the game features a 3-day cycle, with each cycle lasting approximately 1 hour of real time. Once those days are up, the moon will start to descend to Termina, terminating the world completely if you let it. This unique time mechanic adds urgency to the gameplay, as players must strategize and make the most out of their limited time to progress. The ability to manipulate time using the ocarina and various masks adds depth to the gameplay, allowing players to rewind time, slow it down, or even skip forward to specific events. This constant race against time creates a sense of tension and compels a player to make impactful decisions within the game's world. Twilight Princess, the game where Link canonically turns into a furry. Combat, just like Ocarina and Majora, once again allows for the player to target enemies and land precise cuts to them using basically the same controls for the GameCube controller. But why use the GameCube controller when you can just use the Wii? The Wii remote allowed the player to swing as if they were wielding the sword itself, to execute the sword strikes in a much easier fashion. Skyward Sword, baby, leans more heavily into the implementation of the Wii remote by introducing new gyro technology through the Wii Motion Plus. While more troublesome than it really needs to be, it does help increase the level of immersion for the player. It makes them feel like they're wielding the actual Master Sword itself. If Skyward Sword is a game that's built around motion controls, Breath of the Wild is a breath of fresh air. The game mechanics wise compared with what came before, with the Sheik Slate's multifunctional nature expanding the player's arsenal of tools and enables creative problem solving, and most importantly, ways to speedrun the game. And then there's Tears of the Kingdom. Nintendo has somehow found a way to cobble together Breath of the Wild with Gmod, all the while keeping within the confines of the Nintendo Switch's hardware limitations. You know, it's a miracle that this game even exists. All four new powers, Recall, Ascend, Fuse, and finally Ultra Hand, allow the world of Hyrule to become your oyster, with Ultra Hand serving as your gravity gun to manipulate and put two things together to make, I don't know, rafts, planes, cars, and hot air balloons, anything to your heart's content. With Fuse, you can basically make a flamethrower. Ascend basically turns you into Kitty Pryde. I mean, it's the most broken thing ever, as you can literally phase through matter like knife through butter on any surface you please. It really is the symbol of the evolution of game design and how far we've come since 1986.